Is Dr. Karma Lekshe Tsomo, who entered upon monastic life in 1977, taking full ordination in 1982. She studied at Dharamsala in India for 15 years before gaining a PhD from the University of Hawaii. She's currently Assistant Professor of Theology and Religious Studies at the University of San Diego. Venerable Dr. Karma Lekshe Tsomo is one of the founding organisers and the current president of Sakyadhita, the International Association of Buddhist Women, and is the director of Yam Young Foundation, an initiative to provide educational opportunities to women in developing countries. Please welcome Venerable Dr. Karma Lekshe Tsomo.
Namaste, aloha, and tashidele. It's a great pleasure to be here today to discuss this important topic. Feminism, after all, has been called the radical theory that women are completely human. And today there are more than 300 million Buddhist women in the world. We're talking about 300 million people already dedicated to peace, honesty, harmony, loving kindness, and compassion. Certainly, we would want to optimize the qualities and talents of all of these wonderful women. How can we do that best? Well, we see in Buddhism from the text, from the very beginning, that in theory, everything looks great. Women are equally capable of achieving the highest fruits of the path. This means different things in different traditions. In the Theravada tradition, enlightenment is defined as liberation from samsara. Women can do that. We know that without question because in the early texts there are examples of hundreds and thousands of women who achieved the state of an arhat. In the Mahayana, then, the goal is to become a Buddha. And enlightenment is defined as becoming a fully enlightened Buddha. But the Buddha appears in male form, and it is said that Buddhas always appear in male form. After all, that's one of the characteristics of a Buddha. One of the 32 major and minor characteristics of a Buddha is to have a male sign. So we see a discrepancy here between the theory and the everyday realities that women experience in Buddhist countries. We find that there are grave inequalities in access to ordination, in access to education, and in access to leadership roles. So if Buddhists want to become a model for social change in the world, we need to set our own house in order. We have to address the inequalities that exist in our own traditions. When I was ordained as a novice in France, in the Tibetan tradition in 1977, I did not realize that the Tibetan tradition had no full ordination for women. I was very naive. But in the last 20 years, there have been major changes throughout the world. In 1987, Sakyadhita, the International Association of Buddhist Women, was formed, and some of you were present there at that time. And we've seen enormous changes in all Buddhist societies since that time. Sakyadhita has been inclusive, welcoming men, women, lay, and ordained. And men, and particularly monks, have been among our strongest allies. So I'd like to show you some images to illustrate some of the potentials and the realities for women in Buddhism. This is Sujata, sometimes called Radha in some texts. She is the woman who gave milk rice to the Buddha after his ascetic practices when he decided to eat again and gain his strength to achieve enlightenment. She is said to perhaps be the first person to take refuge. That would make her the first Buddhist. This is the tree under which she offered milk rice to the Buddha, and you can see that under the tree today, many of the devotees are women. This is an image of Mahapajapati, the Buddha's auntie and stepmother, that I recently found in Vietnam. She was the leader of the early Sangha for bhikkhunis. In other words, she was a leader for many years. She lived to an old age, and she was a model of leadership for women from earliest times. Now, this is the image of compassion, the Bodhisattva of compassion, Avalokiteshvara, which in India is male. But we see that in China, Avalokiteshvara becomes female with Kuan Yin. And these are the celestial beings attending her. And later we find images like this of Kuan Yin in China. So this was taken in Malaysia, where women become associated with compassion, a very positive image for women. This is another image from the Tibetan tradition, from India, an image of a woman who achieved Buddhahood in female form. This is Tara. She is the model of virtuous activity who helps all sentient beings, sometimes called a savioress. You can see her right leg is extended because she's ready to come and help sentient beings and provide whatever they need. This is another image of green Tara. She protects the conditions for practitioners, whatever they need, the teachings, good health, food, and so forth. This is Machik Labdrön, coming from the Tibetan tradition. She was a flesh and blood woman. So we need to distinguish between images of enlightenment and actual women, because sometimes there is a tendency to idealize women in the etheric, but on the real practical level, on the everyday level, women's roles tend to, move toward the kitchen. So Machik Labdrön was a very famous practitioner from the time she was 13 in Tibet and became a model of a realized woman who achieved enlightenment in this very life, in this very body, a female body. Now, women today live in virtually every Buddhist country. Even Mongolia, which did not have a lineage of nuns, has now established a lineage of at least novice nuns. This is taken in Hanoi, and this nun is the leader of the nuns of northern Vietnam. This is an example of the beautiful temples that women have established, not only in Vietnam, but in many Buddhist countries. We see these as examples of what women can do when we put our minds to it. Here's some of the young novices peering down from the balcony, and they were also very encouraged to see women coming from different countries and interested in what they're doing. This is another Vietnamese monastery in Hue. And the monasteries for women in Vietnam are all led by nuns. So examples again of women's leadership, where nuns are trained by nuns and women are respected and supported by the society as teachers. The discipline, by the way, is impeccable. Now, she first showed me an altar of famous monks from the last 100 years in Vietnamese history. And I said, well, what about nuns? And I was very pleasantly surprised when she took me and showed me an altar of the same size and quality that respected or showed reverence for nun leadership in the Vietnamese tradition. These were all nuns who were recognized for their realization. So what does it mean for women when the archetypes of enlightenment are all male? What does it mean for women when all the teachers are male? When all the figures on the altar are male? It sends a message that women are not quite equal. So these images